Hello and welcome to Real Menopause Talk. This week, my guest is Charlotte Ellison. To give you a bit of context, we recorded just before Christmas 2021. Outside of Instagram, Charlotte is a mother of two, a wife, and works in a secondary school in safeguarding. If you know her from Instagram, you will know her as open, engaging, and brutally honest. Her photos, captions, and stories are incredibly entertaining, precisely because they are so real and relatable. We met up so I could dig a little deeper and learn some more. Lottie, really lovely to meet you, and thank you very much for doing this. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. Yeah, you?
Good, yes, all right, thank you.
Good.
Surviving through the chaos.
Yeah, I'd agree with that statement. I think that's very much how it feels, surviving at the moment. Less of the thriving and more of the surviving.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, God, I'm never very good at this kind of thing. It's terrible, isn't it? For someone that spends so much time talking, I'm quite an introvert. My name's Charlotte, Lottie. I suppose we've come to meet through Instagram. I've been writing a blog for nearly 2 years now called Mood Swings and Other Thing, which started really because I wanted to write about what I was experiencing in connection with perimenopause, I suppose. I didn't know it was perimenopause at the time. I didn't know such a word as perimenopause existed, if I'm honest. But I'd had a bit of a tumultuous time, I suppose, hormonally around when I turned 40. And I hate the use of the word journey. I think it's overused, but we shall refer to it as a journey, I suppose. So, kind of joining my own dots between 40 and 45, 46. And I just had a really strong sense about 2 years ago that I wanted to write about it. And I didn't come to that decision sort of through any real kind of like, I want to help other people and I want to share my story. It was entirely selfish, if I'm honest. It just felt like I've always connected with words and I've always loved to write. And I just felt it would be cathartic, I think, in some way to kind of just put it all down. And that's what I did. And I started writing a blog, but of course I knew nothing whatsoever about writing a blog. And we're talking 2 years ago, so I was very late to the blog writing party. And then started to think, there's not much point in writing a blog if nobody knows the blog's there. So the Instagram was originally quite secondary to the blog with a view to using that to drive traffic towards what I was writing on the blog. But I think very quickly Instagram kind of took on sort of a life of its own and became a bit more like the blog's cheeky little sister, and I kind of just found that I liked hanging out on Instagram and was meeting loads of, really lovely and like-minded people on there. And so, eventually I canned the blog and just focused more on sort of, putting my thoughts and feelings down via my Instagram account.
It is very entertaining and makes me laugh more often than not. And I mean that affectionately, because sometimes you're obviously not having the best of times, and it's really a sort of empathetic laugh, but you are very succinct and very forthright in your posts, and it is just terrific.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's always so lovely. I don't think I'll ever lose kind of my appreciation for when somebody says that, because you do a lot of the time, especially when I think I'm struggling to even be coherent and string a sentence together. When people then come back and say, but what you wrote really resonates, or actually I can really relate to that, you just think, thank God for that, because there was a period my life where I genuinely just thought I was going nuts. And I just think if it even helps one person from not thinking they're going nuts, then that's good in my book. So it makes me happy.
How did you first identify perimenopause? Because like you, I didn't even know it existed until somebody walked into the playground one day and announced this word.
I think it was after a process. I'd been in it very much like you've just referenced. I mean, I'm 47 now, but I would say around the time that I was 40 and in a couple of years prior to being 40, I'd been in and out of my GPs, I'd say a handful of times, not knowing what was wrong with me. And when I say not knowing what was wrong with me, I'd rock up there and sob in front of the doctor and just say, I don't know what's wrong with me because I'm not happy. And yeah, I've got nothing horrible going on in my life. At that point, I wasn't working, so I didn't have the pressure of a job. We were doing okay financially. So it wasn't as though I was had got all of these life stresses going on, far from it. And I just would go in and just sort of say, I just feel so miserable and I can't lift myself. And every single time I went in, there was no real discussion or conversation. It was just, I think you need to take these. And every time they'd give me a prescription, and it was always for Prozac or citalopram. And the inference was very much, I think you're a bit depressed, love. Do you know what I mean? Off your pop, take some tablets. And every time I came out of there, I always just felt better for getting it off my chest. And I never, ever took the prescription and cashed it in, because I had this innate sense that it wasn't depression, because it wasn't constant, and that was adding to my confusion, because it was just a case of some days I was fine and other days I was literally on the floor, but it always passed. And as I say, it was never a constant black cloud, and that just made me really confused because I couldn't work out what the hell was going on. And then I had a bit of a rough episode, I suppose, just before I turned 40, when I had a really bad experience with intrusive thoughts, which was just out of the blue, not something I'd ever experienced prior. I'd never really had issues with what I would call anxiety. I wasn't particularly a worrier, but I am quite a fastidious person. I'm quite a control freak, I suppose. And these intrusive thoughts were horrendous. They were really hard, very upsetting, and actually made me feel like I was going mad. I was convinced I was going mad. I thought I had dementia or something, because it literally, I just couldn't rationalise what was going on in my head. And it was really, really hard and upsetting, frightening, if I'm honest, at this time of year. So it was, looking back, shortly afterwards, I'd been very busy. I was under quite a lot of pressure in terms of some stuff I was doing for Christmas, which ironically was supposed to be fun, but it was obviously causing me more stress than I'd realised. I wasn't looking after how I was eating or what I was drinking. I probably wasn't getting enough rest, so I was running on empty. But that particular occasion, I went back to my doctor and, broke down on New Year's Eve and just sort of said, I'd been away with my family for Christmas, and I just was in this real whirlwind kind of cycle of anxiety and panic, because it's very self-perpetuating. If it gets a grip on you quite quickly, it's very difficult sometimes to get yourself out of that. And before you know it, your reactions to the thoughts are driving your feelings drive more thoughts, and so it's a vicious cycle that just continues, that's exhausting. And I went to see her, and just as I say, I kind of broke down, and she sort of, again, there was absolutely no discussion. There was no speak about hormones or cycles or any of that. It was just, okay, I really think now you need to think really seriously about taking these. And away she gave me another prescription for citalopram. And I took it on that occasion, and I cashed it in, and I took them for about 2 weeks, and they made me feel horrendous and even more out of control, and just lots of side effects that were quite unpleasant. And I just had a bit of an epiphany on my birthday, because my birthday was early January, and I just felt so not me at all. And I just thought, I'm not going to take these tablets. I don't know what the hell's wrong with me, but I'm going to work this out. I'm going to do everything I can. And I just started Googling and researching, which is not always a great idea, because Google, whilst it's amazing and wonderful, it's also full of a whole heap of shit that will send you down completely the wrong avenue and convince you that you've got all sorts of manner of ailments and complaints, which of course you don't. And I went to see a homeopath, and I have to say that was like a revelation to me, because what she gave me that the GP didn't give me was time. And what she taught me very quickly was just kind of, have you thought about any of what you're experiencing in relation to your cycle, and your periods? And I was kind of a bit stunned by that because it hadn't even occurred to me. And then as soon as that light bulb went off and everything kind of, you just start to join more dots. And the more I started to learn about that side of things, the more you start to realise how much everything is connected. And it was really empowering, actually. That's kind of how, I suppose, in a very long-winded answer, I came to realise that, what I was experiencing was probably, and even back then, I don't think the term perimenopause perhaps I was aware of. It was just, these are hormonal changes that you're going to experience in the years leading up to when you enter menopause. So that was probably the point at which I first started to look at my symptoms and kind of join some dots and start to realise that actually that and my hormones were very much connected.
I have heard almost universally that one of the best therapies has been listening to other women who just understand, and they know how to listen to you and make you feel completely normal, in that you might be feeling like you're going mad, but that's okay. What else helped you apart from being given time?
The time was a big one. And then I think I decided that because I didn't have to, I had the luxury of time, so I didn't have to go to work. So it was very much for me about indulging myself in kind of just back to basic stuff. Like, I've got a dog. So it was about going for a walk every day, fresh air, nature, wrap up, even in the winter. Once I started to learn about diet, it was about kind of your happy hormones and your gut. So what can you do to sort of soothe your gut and keep all of your good gut bugs plentiful, because that has a massive effect on your serotonin levels. I also was very deficient in vitamin D, which I didn't realise. And again, that's something that can have a huge effect on your mood, especially. So that was something that I started supplementing quite regularly with, and supplements generally, actually. I mean, the homeopath that I saw recommended a brilliant range of kind of multivitamins that I still take now, because they're very high in sort of B-vits and a great kind of boost. But I am very much an advocate of trying to get as much of what your body needs out of your diet as you can. But I know I'm asking a lot, I mean, I work now and it's a lot harder sometimes to watch what I eat and manage it appropriately. So, I mean, we're all human at the end of the day, and you've got to be realistic about that, because I think I also went through periods where I was very restrictive about, I completely cut out sugar for a time, did the same thing with carbs. I mean, I wasn't a massive drinker, but I've kind of knocked drinking on the head, and I mean, that's very boring on paper. It's dull as, I'm not going to lie. You do feel like the fun sponge when you're just, I'll have a water, when everybody else is knocking back wine. But they are things that work, sadly. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? They're just not that conducive sometimes to a modern day lifestyle. So it does just depend how much effort you're prepared to put in. Whereas sometimes I think for some people it's probably easier to just pop a shitload of vitamins and supplements and try and do it that way.
One of your posts fairly recently mentioned work, and you were going to have a conversation with the people you work for about how you're feeling. Can you tell us all a little bit about that?
I think I hadn't realised how much I was holding on to, actually. I think in terms of, and I think as women, we're not saying that men don't, but I just think as women, I think we do tend to have a tendency to just want to do everything kind of and do it well and not let on, that anything's a problem. I think it wasn't so much about work causing me additional stress. I think it's more about the fact that the changes that are happening cognitively for me, I think it was about how that makes you feel as an individual and the knock-on effect that it has in terms of where once you would feel as though you could breeze through handling stuff and being on top of everything and knowing what's what, being a master of kind of everything that you need to do, suddenly kind of loads of those skills appear to go out of the window seemingly overnight, and you just feel like a fuckwit, if you'll pardon my language. But it's kind of very much like people can talk to me sometimes and I'll respond, and then I'll come out with a random word that's got absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with what I'm talking about. And it's like, people ask you a question and then the word is such an innocuous and kind of usual everyday kind of a word, but you can't put your finger on it because your brain's just like not firing. And it's that kind of thing that just started to make me feel really ineffectual. I have to write everything down because I do not retain information for love nor money. So that's kind of my security blanket, I think, is that I write an inordinate amount of notes about anything, because I just am terrified that I'm going to forget something that's really important. So when I spoke to my manager eventually, so my line manager, who's also a woman, and a few years older than me, so one has to assume, has either been through it or is still in the throes of it. I wasn't really sure what response I was going to get, because she is very much a kind of game face, kind of got a handle on everything, would never know if she's flustered or she's struggling, or because she just, she's very efficient and super good at her job and never asked for help, that kind of a person. And I mean, the first thing I came out with, and I couldn't even get it out before getting upset, was just, oh my God, I'm so terrified I'm going to be judged, because what I don't want is anybody saying, oh, that's just her, she's mental, like, is she mental health? You're just not, I was really, really terrified of that. And I just said, I just feel at times like I'm not coping. And it's not because of what work I'm being given. It's just because in myself, I feel overwhelmed at times, overwhelmed sometimes with emotion. It's not even got anything to do with skill set or ability. It's just I'm overwhelmed by some of what's going on in my head and in my body, to the point where I really can't focus on this stuff, or it all just makes me feel like it's too much. And she was really lovely. I mean, she didn't say too much really, other than that I think it's normal to feel that way. And actually, sometimes when you're raising children and you run in a house and you've got a job, and then life throws other crap at us, as it loves to do, just chuck that into the middle of that mix. It's a big ask. And actually, there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm struggling at the moment. And I think also in my job role, I wouldn't be a very good advocate for, positive mental health and wellbeing if I didn't speak up, because I'm very good at dishing out advice to everybody else and taking none of it on board myself. And I think, again, that's quite a female thing, isn't it, really? We've all got the chat for everybody else, for our best mate or our sister or the woman next door. But yeah, when it comes to taking our own advice, I don't necessarily think that we're the best at that. So it just felt liberating to get it off my chest. And I think I realised following that it was less about perhaps expectation as to what work could or might want to do to support me, and more just about me spitting it out and saying, I'm 46, nearly 47. I think I'm in perimenopause. I just want you to know that, because some days I'm going to be irrational and some days I'm going to be emotional. And actually, you need to know that so that you can understand that it's still me, but that's what's going on. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. I really do. And to have the courage. It does take a lot of courage to be vulnerable. You've got kids as well.
Yeah, I've got 2 daughters. Yeah. So my eldest is 17. She's just gone back and started her A-levels. And then the younger one's 14 in January. So yes, 2 girls, full of hormones here.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, same. 2 girls full of hormones.
Yeah.
So how's it going?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very, very blessed and fortunate that my better half is very sympathetic, empathic, knows exactly, has learned, I think, over time that actually there are some times where a joke and a bit of banter is fine, and there are some times where that absolutely will not go down well, and will result in taking off to a corner of the house where I will burst into tears and think everybody in the world hates me. I'm very fortunate because I think he's very tuned in. He's very willing to learn, I suppose. And, listen, we've got 2 girls, so I think he hasn't got any choice really, the poor sod. And I mean, even our dog's female, so it's a very female orientated household. But I do feel quite supported, and I think we have a great relationship where he will allow me to behave like a complete cowbag at times, and I know that at some point I will come back and just say, I'm really sorry for how I reacted or the way I spoke to you, but I'm not feeling great, or it's this or it's that. He can read me better, I think, than I do myself times. And as for my girls, I mean, sometimes I do question, do I share too much? And then I think absolutely no, I'm not, no, I don't, because I just think it's important. For me, honesty is a big thing in all aspects of my life. And I wouldn't ever want them to worry or think that it was something other than what it is, which is perimenopause. And it's a bit of a standing joke now because they're just, oh, you off on a menopause thing? Mum, is this a perimenopause thing that you're having at the moment? You know, are you moody because have you got the hump, Mum? Because, you know, and it's a bit of a joke, but at the same time, I just think actually those are the kind of conversations that will hopefully normalise it a little bit. And I do feel hugely passionate about the fact that we're so quick to label teenagers sometimes with anxiety and depression. And, you know, with teenage girls especially, I just think it's so important that they understand that so much of how they feel mood-wise is normal, you know, because it's linked to their cycle. And if you chuck in the fact that most teenagers eat a load of crap, they stay up too late, they spend too much time on screens, so they don't rest their brains, that is going to play out in their mood and how they feel, you know. And it does bug me when girls are very quick to, oh, well, I've got anxiety, I've got depression. And you just think, yeah, but have you? Because actually I think if you tracked it in relation to when you get your period, you'd find that it probably only lasts for 1 week, 10 days out of a month, you know. And I really hope that I don't like to go on about it all the time with my own children, but I do hope that just by having sort of flippant, what I perceive to be as quite flippant conversations, it might make it more normal for them in years to come and to talk to their own kids, hopefully, I suppose, on a similar kind of level.
You've had the symptoms, anxiety, depression, brain fog. Has there been anything else that has been standout for you?
I went through a huge crying phase last month and the month before, and that one was a bit of a revelation because it was literally, I'll cry at anything. The most innocuous stuff on the television, you know, that just really shouldn't make you cry, I'll cry. I mean, I seem to be a bit more, I've levelled out again this month, which I'm thanking my lucky stars for, because it was just so inappropriate. I just couldn't stop it. You know, there were a couple of times at work and I was just like, oh, please get a grip. So I think for me, it's always been just cognitive stuff. I mean, physically, I'm going to touch with now because I know some people have horrendous issues with their periods and stuff, and I don't appear to have had those kind of problems so far. So I'm going to touch wood massively and hope that holds true because, I just think that would be horrendous on top of everything else. So definitely more the emotional and kind of, cognitive stuff. I mean, physically, I get joint pain, which is quite frustrating because I've always been somebody that has exercised regularly and likes to use exercise as a means to kind of stay on top of myself and feel good about myself. So that can be a bit of a frustration at times, but I would say it's mainly that side of things for me, yeah.
If somebody is listening to this and thinks, oh, do you know what? Maybe, what would you say to them?
I think the best thing that you can do for yourself actually is to write it all down. Get a journal or a diary, or if you're an app person, an app tracker, if that floats your boat, and just start writing literally the briefest of notes day to day in terms of how you're feeling, anything you're noticing about your body, your mood, your periods, because actually that makes it so much more easier to just join the dots and kind of link the two together. And also it makes it easier to kind of just see where you're dipping, because knowledge is power when it comes to your cycle. And actually there's a great deal that you can do to kind of harness the power of your cycle if you are on top of how your cycle works and you understand it. But for me, that's kind of second nature. But it amazes me how many people aren't interested in that. And I do think it makes it a lot easier because you can preempt then when the lows are going to come. And those are the times where you need to be kinder to yourself in terms of your calendar, you know, because if you're like me and you're the sort of person that does cancel plans occasionally because you just want to stay home in your pajamas and watch shit on the telly and eat chocolate and not talk to anybody, once you've started to track your symptoms, I think doing that makes it a lot easier for you to see at what point in the month those kind of times are going to arise. And I know there'll be an element of people that go, oh, but screw that, you know, because I don't want to live a life where I have to cancel plans and give in to it. And that's fabulous if you can manage to sustain that. But I think, you know, one thing I have learned is very much this time of life is very much about being kind to yourself and cutting yourself a bit of slack where you can, because if you don't, you just give yourself twice the hill to climb. I definitely think tracking symptoms is a great place to start, because it will help you to join your own dots, definitely.
Everybody says once they're on the other side that life is great. What is your vision of part 2, or where do you see everything going once we're through this roller coaster?
Oh God, it's going to be this nirvana, right? Where we're all just we're getting and we're going to have no worries and no stress, and we're just move into this next phase of our life on a fluffy cloud and just be. No, genuinely, do you know what? I'd like to hope that it just. Things ease off, we relax into ourselves again. I came into my 40s and felt very much, aside from all the hormonal issues, I think there's a great deal of liberation that comes with aging, isn't there? You know, and sense of freedom. You care less about a lot of things, and I'd just like to hope that I come through it sort of slightly more resilient, I guess, and with a sense of achievement, because it is. I don't want to talk about it as though it's something to endure, but it is testing like that at times. And I think, you know, if you can come out the other side and not feel broken by it, then that's probably an achievement. That probably sounds really harsh. And all the people out there that take HRT are going to be, Charlotte, you should take HRT, then you won't feel like that. But genuinely, I just think it's, it can be really testing at times, and I just think it's better to be real and honest about that. You know, if you can sail through it on a fluffy cloud, then all power. But I just think for a lot of us, that's not going to be the case, and we should just give ourselves a pat on the back for kind of getting over that hill, and just look forward to maybe 20 years past that, where we can actually be free of that whole kind of stage and just live a very carefree life. Fingers crossed.
Is there anything that you would like to add?
If I could encourage other people to just do their own homework, I would do. There's so much more information out there now than there was, say, 10 years ago, and that's only a good thing. Having said that, there's a lot of people out there offering their opinion and their advice that perhaps aren't quite so qualified to do so, so stick to trusted, recognised sources of information, particularly when it comes to researching things like hormone replacement therapy, but do your own homework. Do be persistent with your GP, because I still think there's a long way to go with some doctors in terms of their recognition regarding, perimenopause and menopause. But, the tide's changing with that as well. I think there's so much more kind of in the media now, and there's some very high profile celebrities that are obviously trying to raise awareness as well, which is great. So it's definitely putting perimenopause and menopause and that stage of a woman's life more on the map. There are some great books out there. Forums like Facebook and Instagram are great places to share information about our experiences, and there'll always be some common ground in that, I think. But it is important to remember that everybody is unique, and therefore their experience and what works and doesn't work is also going to be unique. And I guess probably just be patient, mostly with yourself. Show yourself some love, a lot of love.
Wonderful, thank you. And I will direct everybody to Mood Swings and other things, because it is just a breath of fresh air and it's brilliant and funny. So please keep doing that.
Thank you, Hattie. I really appreciate that. It's been lovely talking to you.
If you don't follow her already, do look Lottie up on Instagram as @moodswings and other things. Follow us on the podcast apps and subscribe to our newsletter on realmenopausetalk.com. Thanks for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.